I have another outdated car analogy that I think is actually pretty helpful for playing the clarinet.
My name is Josh Gu, and after years of studying the clarinet with some of the best teachers from around the world, I am excited to be sharing my knowledge with you. So go to QuickStartClarinet.com or check the description on this video to see all of the wonderful resources I have to help you reach your clarinet dreams. And of course, subscribe to this channel for weekly clarinet and music tips and tricks.
If you don't know what I'm referring to, check out this video that I did where I sort of compare playing the clarinet to sort of driving a Lamborghini and how all of the sort of parts have to work together to be really effective and really efficient. In this video, I have maybe an even worse analogy in terms of relatable analogies where it's relatable to other people, but maybe even a better analogy for helping with playing the clarinet. So this analogy has to do with manual transmission cars or stick shifts where you have a clutch. So that's why it's so unrelatable, because I think it's like 80%. I don't know, that was totally a made up statistic, but I think a large majority of drivers, at least in the United States, drive automatic cars. If you're in Europe, there's a lot more manual transmissions there, so maybe this will be more relatable to you. But I have a feeling in the future, when we're all in electric self-driving cars, all of these driving analogies will be a little unrelatable. But this one's really good, and I think the idea is clear enough that you can apply it to playing without actually having ever driven a manual transmission car. I should also add the disclaimer that I barely know how to drive a manual transmission, but I know a little bit about it. So what I'm talking about is this idea of the friction point. So when you're starting in a manual transmission, the car's on, you're ready to actually start driving, you put in the clutch and you put the car into gear, and then you release the clutch sort of as you press the gas, and there's this friction point where things sort of start to catch as you press the gas, and then you can release the clutch and start actually driving. Now, the thing that happens if you miss that friction point is the car will just die, or you'll sort of jump the gas and then it'll die again. So you have to find that sort of sweet spot and then go. I think with the clarinet, there's also a similar friction point between the reed and the mouthpiece. The way that the sound on the instrument works is you have a mouthpiece facing that sort of curves away, and then the reed goes on there flat. Now, if your embouchure does nothing, if the reed and the mouthpiece are just there, you don't get any sound. There just goes between the reed and the mouthpiece. There's no vibration that happens to actually create the sound. A quick tangential analogy, that's honestly probably a better analogy. Maybe I should have made that the whole point of the video, but this is another good analogy. If you've ever taken like a blade of grass and put it between your thumbs and then you blow into it and it makes that sort of squeaky pitch, the pitch comes from the blade of grass vibrating between your thumbs. Now, if you've ever tried doing this, it can be a little tricky to get it just right. You have to have the right tension on the grass so that it can vibrate back and forth. And even more importantly, you have to have the right opening between your thumbs. If it's too open, then the air will just go past. If it's too tight, it can't vibrate in between. You have to have that right amount of opening that it vibrates between. And this is sort of what I call the friction point, and it's the same exact thing for the reed and the mouthpiece. If you just blow against it or blow through it, the air just goes straight through. So what our embouchure actually has to do is bring the reed to the mouthpiece a little bit so that it can start vibrating against it. Again, too much and you pinch it off. Too little and it doesn't work at all. I think a lot of times we really obsess about not biting because we're often told that you don't want to bite and pinch off the vibrations of the reed, which is 100% true. But if we don't put any pressure on at all, then we're left with that really, really airy sound. This can also happen if you have too much of your lip rolled over into your mouth and you're really dampening the vibrations of the reed and the lip's really squishy. All of those things can contribute to not finding that right friction point and getting the most resonance out of the instrument. So let me demonstrate sort of how this works, and I'm going to do an exercise that I love to do. I've talked about this in other videos before, and what I'm going to do is just play an open G with absolutely no embouchure, and then I'm going to add more and more and more and more embouchure pressure until I close the reed off all the way against the mouthpiece, and you'll sort of hear where that sweet spot is, that Goldilocks zone or that friction point where it vibrates really well. let me see if I can do the visual while I play that. So you see, as I was sort of pushing more and more pressure with the embouchure, it was airy, and then it had that sort of sweet spot in there, and then it completely closed off. And I feel like this is similar to the clutch on the manual transmission, where you're sort of, instead of releasing the clutch, you're adding pressure, 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 and then you have that sweet spot where everything sort of clicks together and gels and starts moving, and that's where we want to be. We want to be in motion, we want the reed vibrating its best, and we want to always be at that friction point, which is totally different than driving a car, because when you're driving in a manual, you reach the friction point, you start going, and then you just let off the clutch totally. But the gas is still there, and that's maybe what the air is. So the embouchure is like the clutch finding that sweet spot. Once you found the sweet spot, don't release it, just keep the sweet spot on your embouchure, and then the air is the gas to keep the sound propelled going forward. And that's the analogy. So next time you're practicing, first of all, try the exercise where you do no embouchure and then add to find that sweet spot. You can hear so easily like where it's a clear resonant sound and then it starts pinching off. And then as you're playing, always ask yourself, am I hitting that friction point? And am I in the Goldilocks spot where it's just right and getting the most vibrations? And hopefully you'll find that it improves your sound quality. Long tones are the perfect place to be experimenting with this, to sort of find that sweet spot, and then hopefully you'll build into your muscle memory like right where it is that it sounds the best, so you can just pick up the instrument and go right and have that good friction, good reed vibrations, good clear resonant sound that we're always talking about. So hopefully this analogy gave you another way to think about things. Try it out in your practicing, and hopefully it makes you sound better. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in another one.